Hey guys, it's me. Hope everyone's doing well. As the video title states, something I wanted to talk to you about today is domestic violence within members of the organization. Um, so, the reason I wanted to talk about this is because after the Oxygen documentary came out, which, by the way, if you haven't seen it, you really need to see it. You can stream it for free. After that came out, just there's a lot of talk about child abuse in the organization, and rightly so. I'm really glad that this is finally getting some attention because it just, I don't know about you, but I always get really frustrated because it feels like nobody really cares so much about Jehovah's Witnesses or what they're up to. They're far more interested in the Catholic Church because they're such a big religion. They're far more interested in Scientology because of, Leah Remini and Tom Cruise and the crazy beliefs that they have. So it kind of feels like a lot of times Jehovah's Witnesses, it just all gets shoved under the rug and no one cares. No one in the secular world really seems to care, which can be really frustrating for us, right? Because we know about all the abuse that's going on. We know about just how horrible they treat you when you leave, and we know that our rights have been violated as human beings, and so it's really hard. It's really hard that no one seems to care. So when this Oxygen documentary came out, I was just elated. I was so happy, and it is getting a conversation going. Which needs to happen. What I kind of wanted to talk about is domestic violence amongst Jehovah's Witnesses in marriages. And I want to talk about that because I feel like it's not more important or anything than the child abuse stuff. I just feel like it is important, but it doesn't get talked about, not even really by us, by ex-witnesses. So I've had some kind of personal experiences with domestic violence within the organization. My dad was abusive to my mom, and I guess this went on. They had me. They had been married for 6 years, by the time they had me, but I guess this had been going on for a long time. So I guess when they were younger, they got married when they were 18, of course. So like my dad would try to scare my mom if they were in the car by driving erratically, and he spun out and like hit a tree, because he was angry at her, and I guess it kind of escalated from just I want to scare you into more physical stuff. So it's hard for me to talk about because when my mom finally divorced my dad, I was 9, and she cited that as her reason for divorce was that there was physical abuse in their marriage, and he denied it. And because I was little, I had never seen. I mean, I'd never seen it. I'd never seen anyone hit anybody else in my house except for me getting my fair share of whoopings. I thought I was the only one who was getting beat in that house. So I shunned her on that. That was my biggest thing. She had left the organization. She wasn't disfellowship, but she did leave. And she divorced my dad, and then she lied about why in my mind. As I got older, became a teenager and became more difficult to deal with for my dad. Was up to a lot of stuff I probably shouldn't have been up to. I started to see his temper and his rage, and my dad has a hot, fiery temper. By the way, in case you're wondering, he's still doing really good. So he's healthy and fine. So anyway, back to being a teenager growing up in my house. My dad would, if he was mad at me, he would throw things. He would never throw anything at me. He never hauled off and hit me, but he was trying to scare me by hurting other things. And what I now know is that he had also done that to my mom before it escalated into more physical stuff. And that is a tactic. That's something that abusers will do to their victims, to try to scare them by showing them that kind of violence. So for many years, I just thought that my mom just didn't love my dad anymore. She didn't want to be a witness, and she just left, and she couldn't be honest about it. It was really hard on my mom because my mom has just been through a lot. She's been through a lot. She's been through a lot more than I have. And I guess throughout their entire marriage, she had been to elders about this countless times. I guess she had been to a lot of elders meetings, because that's what you're supposed to do. That, she didn't go to a counselor. She went to the elders, and exactly what the elders told her. You need to go home, you need to pray more, you need to go out in service more, and you need to be a more submissive wife and win him without a word. So that's why my mom stayed in a abusive and violent relationship for 15 years. She stayed in that. So it took me a long time, but I finally was able to admit to myself the kind of person that my dad really was. And it was hard for me to do that because I was such a daddy's girl. And he could just do no wrong. And my dad is a very charismatic, kind of jovial kind of guy. So he was almost like my cult leader in a way. He really, really had me wrapped around his finger, and there was nothing that he could do wrong ever. So when I finally did come to that realization, it was, I think I was already like in my late 20s, and I was talking to my mom on the phone, and I asked her to tell me, tell me the truth. Did this really happen? And she said yes. Again, she's never changed her story. My dad's stories have flip-flopped a lot, but my mom's story has always remained the same. And I believe her, and I wish that I had believed her from the very beginning. So the problem as far as the organization is concerned is, my mom was in danger. The cops did show up at our house a couple of times. Towards the end of their marriage, she did start calling the police, and they would show up. But, at the time it was like, sir, do you have anywhere else you can go? It wasn't like now where it's, they realized that this could lead to a murder. So they treated it a lot more seriously. But when I was a kid, it was, they would show up and they would tell my dad to, take a walk, and then they would leave and do nothing. So there was a little bit of a paper trail there, but I mean, this could have been so much worse. It could have been so much worse for my mom. And the only people that she was told she could go to for help couldn't help her. They told her exactly what they were supposed to tell her. And my mom was a very humble and she's a very humble and kind of quiet person, and she felt very powerless, and she felt like she was wrong all the time, and that they were telling her the right thing to do. So she stayed for a very, very long time until it became too scary, which is around the time the cops started showing up, and that's when their marriage officially ended. When she left my dad, she sort of snuck away. My dad went on a business trip, and she packed up our house and me and put me in the truck with her, and we just left, and we drove 2,000 miles away. She didn't tell him that she was leaving, and you don't do that if you're not frightened, which it took me a long time to understand just how scared you would have to be to do something like that. because that's a big deal. I think the biggest problem as far as my family is concerned is my dad does not fit the stereotype of what you might consider an abusive husband. So I think there's just an image that's conjured up, when we think about a violent husband. We think about, in my case anyway, I would think about probably a drunk who puts holes in the wall and will beat his wife and kids black and blue mercilessly. Someone who would flip tables if dinner is late. I mean, that's what's in my brain. But what my dad has shown me is that there is no one size fits all when it comes to abusive husbands or abusive spouses in general. My dad never was violent with me, ever. He was a really, really good dad. When I was little and my mom was going through all of that, he was a great dad to me. He would sit on the floor and play Barbie dolls with me for hours, and he made a game out of everything for me, and he just doted on me, and I got all the love that a kid needs. So he didn't quite fit into that mold. He didn't drink like at all. When I was a kid, he didn't start drinking until my mom and dad got divorced. Then the drinking started, but I mean, he didn't really drink at all. Like maybe here and there, every now and again, but he did not drink. He kept it together pretty well. And that brings me to a story that I would like to share with you guys. I don't think I've shared this on my channel before, and if I have, I'm sorry. But when I was about maybe 7, 8-ish, I was in my room and I was playing with the door closed. And my mom and dad were in their bedroom and they were fighting. And that was very, very typical. They fought a lot, and they would always go in the bedroom and close the door. And that's where all of the abuse went down, I guess. But I could hear them fighting. I could hear things slamming around. I could hear all of that, but I never saw anything. But it was just a normal day. I'm playing and my mom and dad are screaming at each other. And then all of a sudden, my bedroom door just flies open, and my dad is standing in the doorway, and he is just, he's scared. He's like short of breath, and he looks really erratic, and he grabs me by the arm and he says, there's a demon in the house. And he yanks me out of my bedroom, and he's got my mom in her hand, and then in his other hand he's got my hand, and he drags us, run to the living room. And we sat on the floor, we kneeled on our knees and held hands in a circle, and he prayed to Jehovah to take the demon away. It's funny that I hadn't really thought a whole lot about that or shared that story too much until very, very recently. It just kind of came back into my head recently, and so I decided to ask my mom about it. So after he was done praying, he threw himself onto the couch face first, and just started sobbing uncontrollably. That was the first time I'd ever seen my dad cry. I'd never seen my dad cry. My mom got up and she just walked back to her bedroom and she closed the door, and I was just like, what just happened? So recently I brought that up to my mom. I was like, hey, do you remember that? And she said that she was sad that I remembered that, because she thought that I had forgotten, because we never talked about that. Not even then. No one ever brought it up. I never brought it up. Neither one of my parents ever said another word about it. That happened, and then it was over. And so she thought I had forgotten about it. So when I brought that up, she says, well, he hit me that day. And that's when he freaked out. And it all just started to really fall into place in my brain. And I can see it. I can see it now. I can see my dad getting so angry that he would hit or slap or something, and then recoil in horror, because he knows right from wrong, and he knows that that's bad, and then instantly blame it on demons. I can totally see that happening. My dad has never been in a fist fight. He's not a violent person. But I could see him getting that mad, popping off, doing something really, really scary and bad, and then instantly being, like, what made me do that? And the only answer that someone like him has is demons, because it can't be him. He's a good Christian husband. So that's when I started, her telling me that kind of challenged my my understanding of domestic violence, and who an abuser is, and what that looks like. And it's just something that I wish that we could talk about a little bit more in this community, because I think a lot of women have been through it. In fact, right there towards the end, I guess, of their marriage, my mom had spoken to one of the elders in the congregation on the phone, and she said, "I'm afraid he's gonna kill me." She said, "He's gonna kill me." And this elder said, "Well, let him kill you then." And she hung up the phone. That's the mentality, and it's not just my mom. But my mom feels kind of alone, and the reason why is because this just doesn't get talked about very much. In fact, when she was a few months ago, we were discussing this on the phone, and I was like, "Well, have you looked at YouTube? I bet there's a lot of people who have been in that exact same situation." And so later on in that day, I searched YouTube, and I found very few references to Jehovah's Witnesses and domestic violence. A couple. It's not like there's nobody who's out there talking about it, but there was just sadly not as many as I was thinking that there would be. Not that I want that to happen to people. That sounded awful, but I just know that my mom and this couple of people that I found on YouTube, they're not the only ones. And it seems like the people on YouTube had more of like a their mates were a little bit more of that stereotype of just kind of a piece of crap in the first place. Which my dad wasn't necessarily just a mean and violent person. He's just really, really screwed up. So anyway, all that to say, what I want for my mom is for her to not feel so alone. I want her to know that there are other women out there who lived with abusive relationships, and went to the one place that they were told they were going to be safe to go to, which was the elders, and were told that they needed to go home, pray more, go out in service, and be more submissive. If that happened to you, share and help, if you're comfortable with it. If you're not, then that's your thing. But if you are comfortable, what I've found from doing these videos is that having just little things to say here and there that don't seem like a big deal to me can mean a lot to someone else. And to my mom, who is still suffering from all of that, some 30 years later, 30 years later, it would just mean the world to her, because she's felt very alone all this time. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. And again, I'm not saying that this is more important than the child abuse issue. It's certainly not. It's as important. And I think it's just time that the organization was also exposed for how it treats women who are in situations like this, and that they need to do more to protect them. Like maybe just call the police. But we know how they feel about that. So anyway, that's the end of my video. That's everything I wanted to say. And again, I hope everyone is doing well. And yeah, let's get a conversation going about this. I'd love to know what you guys think. And I will be back again real soon. Y'all take care.